This is The Bottom Line, a show designed to help Australian businesses succeed. On the show, you'll hear from leading Australian business owners as they share the lessons they've learned building their companies. You'll learn from their successes as well as some of the challenges they faced along the way. We also talk to experts from a range of fields who share specialised techniques you can use to improve your business. I'm your host, Savan Tuna, and I'm a director at Alexander Spencer, and I'm really passionate about helping Australian businesses succeed. Revenue and sales is the lifeblood of all businesses, but without a brand and an identity, it's really difficult to grow your business. Today we're joined by Dee Madigan, an expert in brand development and sales and many other things. And we go deep into how businesses can improve their branding to grow their business. Let's dive in. Hi Dee, thank you so much for joining me on The Bottom Line today.
I am very happy to be here.
Well, now we've met at a function. You were a keynote speaker at an accountancy function that we went to. I thoroughly enjoyed that session. It was a bunch of boring accountants in a room, and you definitely sparked the room when you presented. So I'm really excited to get you on today to talk all things about marketing, branding, and growing your business. But for our listeners that are unfamiliar with who you are and your background, can you sort of dive a little bit into sort of your journey in who you are and your business?
So I've always liked the power of words. I didn't really know about advertising as a career, though, when I finished school. It was one of those careers that I think people got into if they knew someone in there, but if you didn't know about it, I sort of didn't think about it. So I did a teaching degree, English teaching, because it's sort of what you do when you like words and don't really know what you want to be. And then I was managing a pub in Sydney while I was teaching, and a lot of advertising people used to drink in there, and they suggested I do award school, which is just a 6-week course, or it might be 12 weeks, and industry run. And I graduated in the top 10 from that and got a job placement and working in big sort of agencies and working on a lot of big clients, a lot of financial clients, HSBC, Combank, and a lot of feminine products, lots of tampons. And I did that for maybe 10 or 15 years, lots of fun, big budgets and whatever. But I don't know, in the end, I was really conscious that advertising is an industry that tends to throw out creatives quite young. It was really important to me to build my own business and to build my business with clients that I feel ethically comfortable with as well. So I do a lot in the progressive space, not entirely in the progressive space. I've got some brand clients as well, but just, ones that I like to work on. And so, I understand what it is like to build a small business and market a small business. I will sort of, true confessions, I'm not brilliant with money. In fact, my business partner and I have an agreement that as soon as clients start talking budget, I'm like, nope, speak to Stuart about that. So apparently we'd be broke. But I think it's always about working out the things that you're good at and not doing the things you're not good at, because it just takes more time than it would to pay someone else to do it, and you just stress yourself. So we are 10 years old in September, which is nice. It went very, very quickly. And we've got an office in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Darwin.
Fantastic. So talk about your business. 10 years ago, you founded Campaign Edge. You've got a business partner. Tell us a little bit about your business journey. Our listeners are SMEs and business owners themselves. Take us through that business journey and how Campaign Edge was formed.
Yeah, so I felt that there was a market for a progressive ad agency. There was a lot of do-gooders out there, well-meaning people, but they weren't actually skilled marketers. And I felt that there were enough sort of behavioural change campaigns and union campaigns and government campaigns for them to be a solid business in that field. So I mentioned it to a production company I've been working with, and they, very good businessmen, who said, absolutely, we will back you. Had the lawyers draw up the papers the next day. They've done very well out of me. So I should have been like, wow, they're really quick on it. So that was great. That was cutting edge at 51%, because, again, they're smart business people. And then the first thing I did was hire someone I'd worked with before who I knew could handle the things I'm not good at. So the client service and the money side of it, and hired him and gave him equal shares to me, because I think that is the smartest business decision I ever made. And from then, we just sort of have grown slowly but steadily, which is the way we like it. The only thing that was probably bigger is we Darwin was an existing company that we bought. But having said that, we kind of leave them to do their own thing anyway, because the NT's the NT and it runs in its own unique way, and it's better to let the people up there do that. And we do a lot of election campaigns, obviously, which is fun. That was our first campaign, was Queensland 2015, and we've done 24 since, 14 wins in a row, including last federal. So that's pretty nice as well. That's you wouldn't set up a business to make money out of election campaigns. It's done on the smell of an oil rig, but it's a lot of fun.
Wow, that's different. So are you paying attention to what's going on in the States with those election campaigns then?
Yeah. Yes, I am. It's very different to here because they don't have compulsory voting. Getting people sort of angry at things is so important because it gets them to show up and vote, which is why you just get the rhetoric is just nuts. But I think Kamala's strategy of making Donald Trump weird is really smart because it's one thing he can't help but feed into every time he shows up. So it's clever. And I think she'll be all right. To be honest, I actually think Biden would have slipped over the line anyway.
There you go. And just in terms of our listeners, just what are some of the services that you specialize in?
I say branding, and I know that a lot of people think about branding as a logo or a strapline or a new website, and so many small to medium businesses have been ripped off, I think, by people who go, we're going to rebrand you, and all they do is just give you a new website, and then you wonder why you're not getting any more business, but you've just spent a ton of money on that, because that's not what branding is. And branding is how people feel about you, not what you say about yourselves anyway. And I think that what we do for companies, smaller businesses particularly, is spend time with them and actually work out what their business goals are, because they might think they need an ad or they might think they need this, but it's actually better to say, you know what, let's take a step back. Well, what are your business goals? Where do you want to get to? And let's work it backwards, I guess, if you like, from there. But what has changed, particularly for small businesses, is the way we buy media. So, it used to be you just ads, small accounting firms could not afford to be running ads on Channel 9 News on a Sunday night. That's $30,000 a pop, And before that, you have to make the ad, so it's a couple of $100,000. But now with catch-up TV, you can postcode target. So you can literally buy the postcodes, and catch-up TVs, like your 9 Now or your 7 Plus or whatever when you're streaming. And more people are watching them on the big screen. And you only pay like 11, 12 cents for a completed view. And they're unskippable. And also with the advent of digital cameras instead of the old film things, it's much cheaper to make things anyway. And a really clever idea doesn't necessarily mean a big production budget. And that's something we're good at because we work in the political space. Smell of an oil rag stuff is actually making it interesting and engaging. And this is where the industry charlatans, they've gone to these companies going, I'll help you tell your brand story. And YouTube's full of companies' brand stories that no one watches because no one cares about the brand story. People care about themselves. They always cared about themselves. So it's always about finding out what is it about your brand that connects to what people want, and essentially what's an interesting way to get that message across. That's kind of all it is. And then you just got to make sure that it's all really functional in terms of how people find you. It's actually not brain surgery. People got overexcited with digital they're like, we can micro-target, which is great. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're still people and you're talking to people, and people make all purchasing decisions emotionally. Choosing to use a particular accountant is absolutely a purchasing decision. And also no one's obliged to watch your ad. That's the thing as well, is you can say everything you want, but if no one's paying attention, you're wasting your money as well. And engagement's sort of the ticket price to get people's attention. So you have to get their attention, and then you have to persuade them to use you. That's kind of it.
I love it. Let's talk about attention, because we talked a little bit about attention at our session. You made us do this awesome exercise, which I loved, and it involved creativity. So in terms of creating that attention, I feel like what we talked about in the session was you only have a very limited amount of time with the social media these days. They're so fast paced of how we view things. You kind of need to grab people's attention quite quickly. Otherwise, they'll just scroll or read another article and whatnot. So my question is about attention grabbing piece. Accountants and some business owners that are good at what they do aren't experts in that field. Can you give us sort of some tips or talk about attention and creativity as a sort of an overarching pillar of what needs to be done well in order to now grab the attention that's so widely sought after?
So people see 6,000 ads a day on top of their social media feed. So there's actually more places than ever that people can ignore you, and you have such a little amount of time. But if you get it right, it's actually cost effective for you as well. So, like Facebook, the Facebook algorithm rewards engaging content. So, you're much more likely to appear in people's feeds for less money if you do creative and interesting stuff. Having said that, it's still got to be on brand. If I'm going to choose an accountant and some accountant's doing some weird, wacky stuff that might get my attention, it mightn't make me want to use them either. It is finding that fine line. Everyone thinks you have to be super quick, and yet some of the most popular pieces of communication online in the last year or so have been long pieces as well. People are happy to watch long as it's relevant and interesting. But in terms of creativity, firstly, I think creativity, all businesses should be more creative anyway, not just in their marketing, just the way you think about things, because creative businesses are better businesses because you start to thinking about things in unique ways. But in terms of being more creative, the best in your marketing, the best thing to do is write yourself a really clear brief and actually write it down, because when you write things down, that just clarifies things in your mind. And think, okay, who am I talking to? Because if you're saying the same thing in the same way, but to different audiences, you're going to fail. So think, okay, this is the type of person I'm talking to. And if you need to, get a photo or cut something out of a magazine or something that kind of represents that to you and stick it on the wall, and then imagine that as you're writing your brief and thinking, what do I want to say? And it should be one sentence. Like, people only take one thing out of an ad, so don't overload it with other stuff. People are looking at accountants. They'll probably Google 2 or 3. So you have to be in the consideration step, but your ad just has to be that bit that grabs people's attention, and then other bits of it can be down that sort of funnel, if you like. So write down the one thing that you want to say, and then maybe 1 or 2 proof points why they should believe you. And then you think about, write down your tone of voice, because then that dictates like how the ad looks and feels, but also how you want the person to feel. That's really important as well. If you want them to feel like when they're using you, they should feel like they're relaxed, and that's fine. Like, you want people, who've had really stressful experience think, okay, I feel relaxed. Or you might be an accountant who's really focusing on getting people's businesses to run better, like really not just tax returns and things like that, but a much more, not obviously breaching responsibilities and going into financial advice, but it's something where you want people to feel really excited about coming to see you, like you're going to open up opportunities. Then that would dictate the idea that you put behind it as well. Yeah, really thinking about how you want people to feel, and then how do you want them to act. And if it's an online thing, what you want is a really easy click through. And then what I do when I write a brief, don't try to answer it straight away. If you try to come up with any solution straight away, you come up with really logical stuff. And if you just let the brief sit in your mind for a couple of days, then you start coming up with some lateral stuff. And the lateral ideas are more creative and they're more interesting, but you've just got to let it sit in your brain for a little bit to let that percolate. Incubate, I think, is the important thing. But having said that, there is a skill to it. So honestly, if you're advertising, you're better off. And just as you would say to clients, don't do your own accounting, I would say to people, probably don't do your own advertising. I'm not saying that just to spread my business, but if you want to give me a call, that's good as well. But there absolutely is a skill to it, and there's too many charlatans out there who are happy to take your money without any real understanding of how to get people's attention.
I love it. Obviously, you've got a team that helps you make this happen, and creativity is important, not just from the top, but you have to have creativity within the team. How does Campaign Edge foster creativity within your team? How do you ensure that translates into effective campaigns? Do you guys have a client get in a room, get the whiteboard out? How do you, as a team, come up with these ideas?
That would be the worst way. No great campaign has ever come from a committee of people in a room brainstorming. That is my idea of hell. No, and as I said, what we do is we sit with the client and talk about their business and really try to understand their business, and then we write a really tight brief with the client and get them to say, yes, that is what we want to say, and then we take it away and come up with ideas. But like in terms of the agencies, you have, like, I hire people, they're called creatives, and they're people who have to have usually done award school. They need to show me that they understand what an idea is, and an idea is kind of the creative hook that holds all your comms together in a kind of a unifying piece. But then we have other people in the agency who are not creative, but they're still creative people, but their job is not to come up with the idea. Their job is to bring it to life. So we've got producers, and that's what they do. Or we call them suits, but account service, who deal with the everyday things with the client, the back and forth and all that kind of thing as well. And then we've got our creatives. And different people do different jobs. We do not get everyone in the room to come up with an idea because honestly, you would end up with a dog's breakfast. And then what we do, and I said the brief is when we think we've nailed the brief, we'll sit down with the client and say, look, is this exactly right? And if the client says yes, then you come up with usually 3 or 4 different ideas for that brief. And it's dependent on budget as well. Like, it's better when clients give you a budget because then you write to that budget. But sometimes if they're new clients, they mightn't really know. So what you do is you, look, this is this much, this one's this much, this one's this much, and this is the kind of media spend you'd need on there. So that is essentially how it works. And with the creative, we work generally in teams of, like, we will back and forth with each other. One person will come up with an idea and someone might add to it a little bit in that, but only amongst the creatives we get very on this. That's not to say that clients can't come up with good ideas. Like often, like on Friday, I was presenting something to a client and they said, could we change it so that this says this? And it's like, actually, that is a really good idea. So in terms of tweaking and that, yes, everyone can input at that point, but in terms of coming up with the idea, that's done by the creatives in the ad agency.
We talked a lot about branding, creating, your identity, your voice, and so on. Talk about getting that to market. Obviously, there's lots of channels now. Do we just go out there and put a wide net? Can you talk to how we utilize these channels in the best way?
Yeah, no, that's called pay and spray, and it's very inefficient. What's good now is it used to be everyone say, oh, you have to do this kind of video for this platform and this one for this one and this one for this one and this one for this one. And nowadays, I'm just as likely to see a good TikTok video on Facebook or Instagram. So you don't need to resource them all. Just pick one and do it well. But why it's so important for people like accountants and that now is that as software gets better and as AI gets better and as people are more able to do a lot more things themselves, you don't want to be making yourselves redundant. So you need to be showing people why you add value beyond stuff they can almost do themselves. And accountants, of course, do add a lot of value, but a lot of people don't realise that. They think of accountants as just the people who do your tax return and, I can pretty much do that myself now with their software. So it's about that, and it's about long-term relationships with people. As accountants would know or should know, it's far easier to keep customers than get new ones. So it's what you can be doing in terms of your existing customers to increase the amount of business they do with you. So that might be a different kind of marketing than a broader marketing for new customers. You would think, okay, these are the people. How can I talk to them in a way that gets them excited about using more of me? And that then goes back to the business model. You'd sit down with an accountant's firm and say, look, what's your client makeup like? How many are retention clients? Are you losing a lot? If so, why? And actually kind of figure out where the problems are before you even start any marketing at all.
And where do you think the future holds? You touched on AI and digital a little bit. Do you think it's going to evolve into something really unique, or has advertising just been the same for hundreds of years? We need to provide value. We got to grab attention. I look at some of the older ads that have been around, and you think, geez, that's not too different to kind of what we do today. It's just in a different way. Where do you see the future of marketing, branding, and that world?
I reckon it's exciting. In the old days, yeah, there were some good ads, but there was always some really terrible ads as well, and it didn't matter because we know that people have to see an ad 6 or 7 times for it to work. And in the old days, if you did a big enough media buy, you kind of had a tracked audience in front of the TV show or whatever, and they'd see the ad. Even if it was rubbish, it still worked. Now, well, we know the under 25s are just not even watching like broadcast TV, and everyone else has sort of got 3 things going at once anyway. So you have to be better, which is good. And the entertainment bar is really high. If you look online, there's a lot of really cool stuff out there. So for me, AI is problematic for the creatives, the copywriters who used to write long copy websites or brochures and that, because that's almost all AI now and certainly will be. But for me, it's fine because AI works on logic. It literally scans the internet for the most obvious for what's been done, and creativity is not logic, it's lateral, which is the unexpected. So in a sense, it's okay like that. I am concerned about production. You could I'd foresee a future where in a couple of years you could put in what you want to happen in the ad and AI just makes it happen. And I think people need to be really conscious of what they're calling progress is actually a whole lot of people's jobs will go. And then we'll be like, oh my God, no one's got any money to spend on anything. And it's like, well. So I think AI needs to be treated a lot more with a little bit more caution than perhaps it currently is. It also tends to reinforce stereotypes. Like if you put in inmate into AI, it'll bring up a black inmate. If you put in judge, it'll bring up a white old man. So it tends to reinforce stereotypes as well. So we need to be a little careful on that. There's been some great misuses of AI in the marketing industry. Levi's had the best own goal, where they decided to use AI to showcase more diverse models instead of employing more diverse models. And they got the backlash that they absolutely rightly deserved.
Oh, there you go. Don't do what Levi did. So I want to ask a question that when you said, oh, God, no, do not do that. I love that response because that's a real TikTok. What did she, oh, God, no, say to that? I'm trying to think of a question that'll give me that reaction again, but I don't know what to say. What I was going to go to talk about was this evolution of the generations that we're having. We've got the older generation that are growing, they're living longer, they're staying in business longer. Some are exiting, but we're seeing in our business and people I talk to, the business owners are staying in business longer. But then we've got this influx of this young gen coming in, they buy things differently, they look at things differently. Can you talk about those two audiences and what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, so I think particularly with careers like accounting, the Gen Zs are a little problematic for you because the things that used to work in favour of choosing accountancy as a career was that it was solid, long-term, safe. Now, there's this group of young people who are never probably going to be able to afford to buy a house. So in a sense, it's sort of like, well, why should I tie myself down to what they think might be a boring career? And that is absolutely mightn't be at all true, but that is the perception. Why should I do that? I'm YOLO. You only live once. I just want something where I'm doing different things all the time because what's the point of sort of, a solid, secure job? So that means you're going to struggle for employees, particularly at a time where there's such low unemployment. People can be very, very picky. The other thing as well is young people are looking for employment in companies that exemplify the values that they have. Now, there's so much that accountant firms can do to attract those people, but it means actually looking creatively inside your own business as well. What are the things you can do in an interesting way that might attract young people who think, well, here I can get a good, well-paid job, and whether it's there are companies who are doing working 9-day fortnights is interesting, or giving employees 2 days a month off to do a passion project. And it might be something that's of value to society where they have to choose like a volunteer thing or something like that. But those are things that accounting firms could absolutely do for young people. I always say flexibility is concerning for me a little bit. I think it's really hard to build a brand if no one's in your office. And particularly the conversations that those older people have, and you're right, there are older business people staying in business and they've got such value that they should be passing down to the younger people. And if the younger people aren't in the office, that's just not going to happen. And I worry, and it means the young person's skills pretty much just stay stagnant because they're not learning as much as they should be. So I would say be really creative, make your staff go to the office at least sort of for 3 days a week would be part of my advice on that. Ad industry did it really badly. They sort of stuck slides and stuff in the office and it's like, woohoo, look how wacker we are. And all that happened was clients would come in and think, well, that's where my bloody money's going, So there's a fine line between wanting to be creative and fun and also responsible with your clients' money as well.
Yeah, I like that what you said with the working from home. I genuinely believe during COVID, you kind of had to make an effort for the non-structured conversations. But in an office, when everyone's in the office, you hear conversations. They're next to you, or as you're walking by getting lunch, you're having a conversation that's not pre-organized. And it fosters these ideas, these learnings, so many things that I believe you lose when you're stuck at home. And I think, well, we tried our best to get the staff into the office and we do a really good job with that. But I think we do need to be careful with flexibility as business owners, just to make sure that the camaraderie between the team and the benefits that they get are really, really important. Finally, what advice would you give to business owners looking to create campaigns that not only reach and engage their target market, but also achieve long-term business goals?
Yeah, like it is about being creative, but working out, okay, if our business goal, if our 10-year goal is here, what's our 5-year goal look like? And bring your marketing in line with that. Okay, so at the beginning, what we need to be doing is building our brand. So this is the kind of marketing we need to be doing. And then we need to move on to, or at the same time, do more what I call sort of direct sales, where it's more of a click-through stuff. The thing with the click-through stuff is it's more rational. So it's not, generally it'll give you a short-term sugar hit for a business, but it doesn't build a brand. But I'd say to companies, don't get nervous about brand videos, but make sure it has to be interesting to the consumer. It is not about you ever. So, and anyone watching has to feel like they want to do something about it. But there was a great ad that was for Cowra Motors, and I still remember it. That's how good the branding was. And it was a radio ad, cheap as chips, local radio ad. This was 20 years ago. And the ad was basically, we'll treat you like a member of the family, because you probably are. And it was just so inexpensive, absolutely tied to their brand as family-owned, local kind of thing. You can do really smart stuff that's not weird and big and wacky. I thought the H&R Block stuff was really good from years ago, you know, when it was the super nerdy kind of people, because we were sort of secretly pleased, because that sort of blended into what we might feel about accountants, but in a good way as well. You don't need to have big, expensive production budgets. Just a really clever, beautiful, simple idea that you just push out only to the people who need to see it. So you're not paying a ton of money. And again, that might mean spending a little bit of time, again, working out, why do people come to you already? Because if you haven't sat down, and you mightn't have done this, and I know what it's like with businesses, you're so busy running your business, you sort of forget to stop and think about your own internal brand. And what you'll find is everything is there. Everything's there. You just actually need to bring them into alignment and articulate them so that your staff understand what your brand is as well. But just think, okay, if the people are coming to us, what do they like about us? Actually ask them. And you'll probably find that there's consistent things. You think, okay, that's one of our brand strengths, so why don't we push that a little bit more? And again, if people are coming back to you, what makes them come back to you? And it's also where people leave. Why? What made them choose not to use you as well? Sometimes we don't like to have those awkward conversations, but we should. Same with internally, speaking of awkward conversations, is sometimes with management, by the time you find there's a problem internally, it's actually really stuffing up your internal brand. You know, you get that one person who's just a real misfit or whatever. So I also say, even with small companies, put in systems to get staff feedback, because usually then if it's a small problem, you can deal with it. But as I said, in management, sometimes you're the last to hear about the problem. So by the time you're hearing about it, it's a real big problem.
And I guess there's a flow-on effect of building an awesome brand, because not only does it help attract new business, new clients, new customers, but it also starts to talk to the people you want to attract to work in your business. So obviously Google, Facebook, and places like that have done an amazing job in building that brand where people feel proud to want to get a job there. So probably Apple's the other one. So I think it's important to not only think of brand development, not only as an acquisition for growth in revenue, but also bringing the best talent. So we could talk for hours, Dee, but unfortunately we've run out of time. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your expertise with our listeners. I really enjoyed the chat. Your energy is always great. Your energy on the stage that day was so much fun. Thank you again for sharing your expertise with our audience.
My pleasure.
This is The Bottom Line, a show designed to help Australian businesses succeed. This podcast was produced by accountancy firm Alexander Spencer. At Alexander Spencer, we've been helping business owners realise their goals since 1952. And we play a pivotal role in developing, implementing, and supervising the business goals and strategies of our clients. To find out how we can help your business succeed, head to our website, alexanderspencer.com.au. To make sure you don't miss an episode of The Bottom Line, be sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Savan Tuna, and we'll be back next episode with more tips to help you transform your business. And that's The Bottom Line.